Justin A.W. Blair here, coming at you with another YouTube video. I am a writer, I am a painter, an occasional producer of videos, and I am a berserker. Yes, friends, yes. I have lived the berserker lifestyle here and there. At punctuated moments of my life, primarily in my youth, I've gone berserker. Do I regret it? There's no regrets in this life. However, the berserker lifestyle in the year 2026 has little place for most of us. Probably a little place for you, little place for me. And that's why we're going to talk about today. Wonder, Indiana. The Wanderers Havamal. Now, longtime fans of the Justin A.W. Blair YouTube channel might be saying, but Justin A.W. Blair, that's not a fantasy book. Don't you primarily review, discuss, speak about, commentate upon fiction, science fiction, and fantasy in particular? Yes. But I read a lot of nonfiction too. I don't talk about it much. Keep it mum, quiet. That's one of the lessons of the Havamal, by the way. Speak less. Why are we going to talk about this book then? Why does it fit in? Well, partially, I'm thinking about doing some videos, some little roundup videos, just briefly a little glancing look at some of the nonfiction I read, which informs my worldview and my own writing. But also, this falls into a curious place, does it not? There is magic. There are disappearing swords. There are grim skies. There are gods hanging from trees upside down. Yes, Old Norse mythology has informed the fantasy genre. Now, it's 5 a.m. Many of you know. Skull. Many of you know. They call me the wordy bird. I like words, so I'm going to do a little Old Norse for you this evening. Stay tuned. After this commercial, if I remember to edit that in, I'll drop in a little commercial in my book. I don't like long commercials in the middle of a YouTube video, so I'll get to the point quick. My own novel, written by me, Justin A.W. Blair, entitled The Haunt on the Island of Esmer, is out, available on Amazon. You can buy an ebook or paperback format. It is inspired by Malazan, A Song of Ice and Fire, and The Black Company. Epic novels in that vein. Take a moment, check it out. I'm no Old Norse expert, not at all. Though I am the wordy bird, this is really, I've read a lot. I've read too much, frankly. This little book here, though, by Jackson Crawford there's not much of a place to talk about the good and the bad here. I am not an expert on Old Norse. What I will say is that we have a translation of the Wanderers Havamal. And the vast majority of this book, at least half of it, is actually notes upon the translation. Now, where I thought this would be more useful for a general reader is that if the notes for each piece that is extrapolated on by the author gave us a little more context of the world in which this poem was written in, it does a little bit of that, but it tends to focus on scholarly questions of translation, the reason why Crawford chose particular words, particular translations of words, how it differed from prior translations. It's dense. It's scholarly stuff. It's not something you're going to necessarily want to read. I read most of the notes, not even all of them, because I just wanted to read the text itself. Now, let me give you just a real brief overview of what this is. This is a portion of the document we know as the Poetic Edda. Now, the Poetic Edda is one of the main documents, written down documents that we know, that brings us the knowledge of this, we'll just say roughly the Viking Age, Viking world, Old Norse, pre-Christian society, their worldview, their mythology, their religion, their ways of being. But it was written down late. It was written down in 1270. I think it was 1270. In the 1200s sometimes. You know me. I don't do a lot of detailed notes. I like to talk. I just can a man just relax? Just have a talk with his viewers, with his readership? Can a man do that? can. Sometime in the late 1200s, a man, I didn't write this down either, but I think his name was Snorri. I want to say his name was Snorri Sturluson or something like that. Well, this old boy was in Iceland in the 13th century, and I believe this was already Christian Iceland, but I could be wrong about that. He wrote down this massive work, which had primarily, I think, been spoken prior to this. And this is a poem. It is a poem that is supposedly in the voice of the god Othin. What's that, you say? Justin A.W. Blair, did you say that wrong? Why did you say it? Isn't it Odin? Why did you say Othin? Because that's how you pronounce the name of Odin in Old Norse. I'm sticking to it. Had a couple beers, reading through the pronunciation notes there about Old Norse. I'm no expert, but we're going to go with it. No, you do pronounce it. The D, you would think in Odin is like in loathe, the. So Othin. Another, and I'm not getting into this too much because I don't know the material well enough to tell you, but the stress is always going to be on the first syllable in Old Norse. And I'm going to rock out a few passages for you. All right, stay tuned. Anyway, so that's what we're dealing with. The Wanderer's Havamal. Now, this is also where we get, some of you dilettantes out there will know that we have a legend of Odin. I almost feel like I should just say Odin because people will understand that better. Of him hanging for 9 days. One-eyed Odin hanging for 9 days. And this is where we get that legend from this text. It's the only place, my understanding is the only place it was actually written down, this idea about that. Now, I want to come back to something I said at the beginning. But first, what I want to do is make sure I'm actually recording this video. So I'm going to stand up for a second. Crow of memory has been kindly to me, and I did press record. So, skull. Where were we at? Again, going back to this idea about this is a fantasy channel, a sci-fi channel, a genre fiction channel. Genre fiction. A fiction for fools, is it not? For the lowly, for the unscholarly, they say, they're wrong. But the mythology of the Viking Age, of the people of Northern Europe, is a major through line in fantasy. We're not going to go into all this a great deal, but for the Tolkien, the J.R.R. Tolkien respecters out there, remember he was a scholar that knew, understood, and translated Beowulf from Old English into modern English. Old English is related to these Germanic Old Norse languages. That mythology, I think Tolkien also knew Icelandic, the language. I could be wrong about that. Fact check me. Put it in the comments if I'm wrong. So, right from the get-go in fantasy, if we consider Tolkien to some degree one of, and I know everyone will be typing along and say, no, there was fantasy before Tolkien. I understand that. For your average normie fantasy reader, Tolkien represents a beginning of sorts, if for no other reason that he accidentally invented the fantasy trilogy. Is the way I look at good fantasy and the way what I try to write fantasy is I don't want to take directly from a culture. I don't want to make something basically just a simulacrum of some sort of medieval culture. But there are tints to fantasy, and in particular grimdark fantasy and dark fantasy tends to get inspiration a bit more perhaps from the Old Norse, from the Viking Age, from that mythology, than it does from, say, the high Middle Ages, the late medieval period of an England or a France, where you have a more, where the focus of the stories are often on court politics, but something almost looks modern to us, as opposed to the kind of brutal, grim violence of a certain other type of fantasy strain. These are tints. They're like a little tinted window panes you put up to your eye as you're reading a fantasy, and that's what it should be. It should never be a one-for-one borrowing from some sort of historical period. I don't think. I think that it should be kind of a tint, a kaleidoscope of this history that then informs the work, that it gets blended together and maybe rearranged in some ways. It's always in the background. The medieval period is always in the background for fantasy, true. But that's my opinion. And now, with no more preamble, I'll read you a few passages from The Wanderer's Havamal. And I'll do a little bit of Old Norse for you. Why not? Oh, mercy, I'll tell you. Translation, words, skip that, boring, who cares? You don't want to know about that. I was drunk. I was too drunk at wise Falar's house. The best kind of feast is the one you go home from with all your wits about you. Stanza 14. In the Old Norse, Olk ek varth o frovi, at ins frotha faras, vier ulvebast at apte ek hintier, versit gut gumi. Now, that is terrible. And it's foolish. I'm sure anyone who actually can understand and read Old Norse will say, what is this old boy doing? Just randomly trying to pronunciate this stuff, right? And I say I'm at the feast hall, all right? At the feast hall, sometimes we slur our Old Norse. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It's the spirit of the thing. Now, what's this about? It was about him being too drunk at old Falar's house, that old boy there. There was a feast, and he says to you, he says to me, he says to the readers, Odin does, he says, it's best not to get too drunk. And I think he's right about that. And I want to point out here, most of this is frankly a lot of kind of just practical wisdom. When I picked up this book, I thought to myself, am I going to enter a world that is going to inform my own spirit, my own spirituality, my own mind in some sort of profound way? I must say, no, not really. A lot of this poem seems like practical knowledge. Now, I do see a resonance. I see a resonance in some of my own values, which is sometimes disturbing as I read this, but also enlightening. But a lot of this is, there are passages that are really interesting and magical, and I'll read you a couple of those. But a lot of this, especially at the beginning, mainly is concerned with you shouldn't get too drunk at a feast because you're going to act like an idiot and get yourself killed, or you're going to kill somebody else that you shouldn't. And you should keep your mouth shut at a feast and elsewhere, because if you run your mouth all the time, you're going to make enemies, and you're going to act like a fool. And it's better to be alive than to be dead, so you should kill your enemies. I agree with all that. I mean, it seems obvious to me, but I agree with it. At the same time, it is repetitive. It is kind of grim. It is, to a degree, obviously, wisdom for its time and place. But some wisdom is also everlasting, and there are bits of that here. Stanza 70. Should I read the Old Norse first? You like that? Charge some super chats for that. Betra lifdom in se ulufdum, getter kvika elsa ek ubrenna, othgum manifire, in utivar dother fir durum. Trying to give you the feel of it. Now, I wrote in the margins for this, stanza 70, never kill yourself. Good advice, by the way. And I give that advice to you, viewers and listeners. Let me do the translation. Better to be alive, no matter what, than dead. Only the living enjoy anything. I saw a fire burning for a rich man, and he lay dead outside the door. Grim, kind of obvious, true. That is the Wanderer's Havamal. What you ask of the runes will prove true. They are of divine origin, made by the mighty gods and painted by Othin. You'll learn best with your mouth shut. Now, I agree with that entirely, especially the last line of the stanza. The hefer han bast ef han thegir. The hefer han bast ef han thegir. That sounds right. That's the last line there. You'll learn best with your mouth shut. Learn it, memorize it, embody it. This is a nice one. This is nice. I had a friend at a birthday recently. I thought to myself, I'm going to call that guy up. I'm going to say happy birthday to you. Stanza 119. I counsel you, Lodfafnir, if you'll take my advice. You'll profit if you learn it. It'll do you good if you remember it. If you have a friend and you trust him, go and visit him often. Weeds and high grass will grow on a path that nobody travels. It's just a nice reminder. It's kind of a Hallmark card of the Vikings. It's a Viking Hallmark card. Happy birthday. Go visit your friends, Otherwise, the path will grow up with weeds. And the ravens will pluck out your eyes, most likely. Probably the next stanza. Anyway, men become friends when they can share their minds with one another. Anything is better than the company of liars. A real friend will disagree with you openly. Again, this does give you a sense of the kind of culture, does it not? It is a very manly culture, a culture of warriors. We get into a lot of war later. Don't lie, say exactly what you think, this kind of thing. These are values that still, persist in some parts of our culture. This is the scholarly stuff, it doesn't matter. But several stanzas in here, it has a common pattern. Each stanza starts with this exact same pattern of, I counsel you, Lodfafnir, if you'll take my advice, you'll profit if you learn it, it'll do you good if you remember it. And so each stanza starts with that 4-line break of, this is Othin talking to Lodfafnir, and it's a repetitive passage. So I'm going to skip those from now on. When you recognize evil, call it evil, and give your enemies no peace. Am I right? I believe in it. Good stuff. Good stuff. However, that's primarily that. Those are the stanzas that I underlined or wrote little notes to myself and said to myself, yeah, remember that one. It's a good one. Then towards the end, we get into Othin talking about different magical spells. Now, my fantasy lovers, my fantasy enjoyers here, this is what you're waiting for, right? You know what? The practical wisdom. You're a foolish Lodfafnir. Don't be a foolish Lodfafnir. And briefly before we end, really this is what this book is about, is don't be a fool. That's what I took from it. And I hope that's what you take from it. Oh boy, you want to hear this? Let's do this, a little trivia. But I want to give you a sense of what a lot of these notes are about. Just so you understand that maybe this may not be the right translation of the Wanderer's Havamal for you. You may want the full Poetic Edda, or you may want something a little less weighted on the actual language and the whys and hows and the whats of the language. I'm going to read this to you to give you a sense of this. Now, this is from a note on stanza 13 to give you a sense of what the endnotes are like. A memory-stealing heron is more literally ominishegri, heron of unmemory. In this volume, I have rendered the precise heron rather than simply bird, as in my original published translation, the Poetic Edda, Stories of the Norse Gods and Heroes, Hackett 2015, as the mental image conjured by a heron is different from that conjured by a commonplace songbird. I think we'd all agree. I have also made a more thorough examination of the uncommon verb thruma, which occurs here and in stanzas 17 and 30, and concluded that in all instances, its basic meaning is close to English brood, i.e. stand motionless and silent as if fixated. I brood. I'm a wordy bird, a broody, wordy birdie at times. A broody, wordy, birdie, ominishegri heron of memory, as opposed to heron of unmemory. Work with me now, people. I now render broods in place of my original flies. Skull. This is in fact a good match for the behavior of a fishing heron, and this probably also brings us closer to the mental image of the original poet, who perhaps saw a huge heron lurking over the pond, quotes, of a drinking party, lunging into its waters, quotes, to pluck the memory out of the drinkers. In tribute to this curious bird of Havamal, its opposite, Minishagri, Heron of Memory, was memorably proposed in 2007 as the Icelandic translation of USB flash drive, but rejected. The Icelanders, they really missed it there, right? They could have coined that. They could have had a neologism of the Heron of Memory for a USB flash drive, and they rejected it. God knows what they went with. Who knows? Icelandic viewers, Icelandic listeners, please put in the comments how you say USB or memory drive. Okay, so that gives you a sense of the detail of the notes of this book, right? I enjoy this stuff. I enjoy it, okay? I do. Some may not. Understandable. Where are we at here? Berserkers. I'll tell you a little story. Foolish Falconer. As a youth, I went to Lollapalooza. I was hanging out in front of the second stage, and some joker got up there before the show, before the band, before the thing started. And he gets to the microphone. They're doing a mic check. So what they're doing a sound check. He says, hey, people. Does anyone want to come up here and sing a song, do a number while we do a sound check? Anyone raise their hand. I looked around. It was a bunch of fucking cowards. I was surrounded by cowards. I'm not a coward, so I raised my hand. I said, I'll do it. Come on up here. Come up here, lad. You didn't say lad. Come on up here. I went up there. I went up on the stage in front of the people. I had nothing on my mind. Didn't know what to do. There's just some fat man with an acoustic guitar. They're just doing a mic check. They're trying out the speakers for whatever, God knows what band's going to come on first. Some forgettable grunge act of the late 90s. And I said, what are you going to do? I said, fuck, I don't know. Just play a basic blues progression. Because I did play music. I sang or whatever. But I was crazy. I was the youth. I had the berserker energy. At this time, there was a famous B movie, a famous indie flick called Clerks. And I actually watched that movie years later. Garbage, dog shit. But one scene always stuck with me. It's where this, I think, Lithuanian or Latvian or Russian guy, he sings a song called Berserker. And I said, I'm going to do Berserker. And the guy says, I don't know. He didn't even say anything. He's nonverbal. He just shrugged his shoulders. I said, just play a blues progression, you fool. I didn't say fool. I was kind. I was friendly about it. No fear in my bones. The spirit of Thor, Thunder God, possessed me. And he starts playing this thing. I just start screaming in the microphone the lyrics to Berserker. My love for you is like a truck. Berserker. Now, this is the late 90s. Late 90s. And it's fucking Lollapalooza. So it's a bunch of flannel wearing fucking, I've got to watch my language. Watch my language. People know the movie, right? That time. So I sing that. Everybody starts smiling and laughing. They start singing along. My love for you is like a truck. Berserker. I've got the crowd enthralled. You understand? At a young age, crowd enthralled. Finish the song. I don't remember why I told that story. Berserker, that's why. Berserker. I lost my place. Berserkers who are associated with Othin by Snorri. Oh, that was his name. God bless, I remember. Snorri. I love that name. Snorri Sturluson in his Songs of the Yngling Saga, as Othin's men, often use a spell like this one in the sagas. For example, in the saga of Gunnlaug Wormtongue, the hero has to conceal a second sword during the beginning of his fight with a berserker, so that he will still be armed after the berserker magically disables the one he sees him carrying. There's magic, people, and I'm not going to give it away. I'm not going to give away Othin's spells. He'll tell you about them. I'm not going to talk about the runes. I'm not going to talk about any of that because there is a time when one must moderate. There is a time, and I don't remember what stanza it is. It says, listen, Falconer, you fucking idiot. No one faults a man who retires a little early from the feast. Justin A.W. Blair. Like and subscribe. We'll see you next time.